instructions within the system of Reiki, yeah, very clearly. Do not anger, do not worry, be grateful, be true to your way and your being, and be compassionate. Shinshin Kaizen, mind-body harmony. What means that if my body is doing hands-on healing and my mind is all over the place, then there is no mind-body harmony. My mind is somewhere else. So already I've misread the instructions.
Welcome, I'm Diana Fels, and thanks for joining me. I'm really passionate about helping people to transform for their own light to shine. I'm really excited today to be talking and chatting about the Reiki practice with Frans Stiene. Frans Stiene started his journey into Reiki in 1999 and has since dedicated a lot of time into researching traditional ways and practicing in those deeper esoterical teachings. Frans' research has been a major contribution to the world knowing more about the system of Reiki and Japanese practices, and he's written many books including The Reiki Source, The Inner Heart of Reiki, The Japanese Art of Reiki, Reiki Insights, to name a few. Frans is a friend and teacher of mine and has wonderful insights into the Reiki system, and I'm grateful to be able to share some of that with you. Welcome, Frans.
Thank you. Exciting to be here in Australia, Sydney, live. Wow, fantastic.
Yeah, and I love the live aspect. So he's real. See?
I'm real, yes.
He's real, not through a screen or fake. And that real live aspect too is something that resonates a lot with me. So I find I like that in-person connections, being present, and the power of touch. And I think sometimes we've lost that, especially with the way the world is. Yes, technology is great. We get to contact people a lot more often, and there's many ways of doing that. But I think people have started they've lost sight that you need that in-person connection.
Yeah, I think so too. Zoom is great, or the other technology, but actually to be in the person's space, I think also with teaching, we might say, teaching online is wonderful. Yes, of course, it's great, but to be in-person teaching is a whole different ball game. I always say, okay, because a lot of people say it's the same. I said, well, okay, if we do through Zoom, let me give you a hug through Zoom, and then let me give you a hug in person. Is that the same or different? It's very different, right? It's much more with all our senses being aware of what's happening. So yes, in person is always better.
Yeah, and you come across as very much a people person, so I imagine that's difficult when everything was shut down.
I did something different with my life for the last 2 years. But for me, that was really a good opportunity to take also my practice more into my daily life, like the neighbors in my apartment building or in the street, or talking to random people. For me, actually, the system of Reiki is not so much about hands-on healing. Of course it is, but it's a small part, but it's really a way of life, a way of living.
And energy, so we're all connected, so you need to be present. I think sometimes there's lovely stuff you can do over the internet, but I think there's nothing beats that in-person connection.
Absolutely, yeah.
So one of the things I would first like to talk about is I really love hearing about people's journeys, and you've had an interesting one. So how did you first get into Reiki? What sort of, how did you stumble into it?
Oh, yes, I was never really into all of this thing, and I was more like a big party person, what is always great. So when I was 16, I started to have back problems. And I had it till about I was 30, and so I would pick up a little fluff from the ground, and then have physiotherapy, got really strong painkillers. The pain would move through my legs, and so I was even in plaster from here to here for about 2.5 months, 3 months, or something like that. I can't even remember. When I was young, nothing really helped ultimately, and I said, okay, when you get older, it's only going to get worse, and it did. In my late 20s, I started to have a lot of back problem, a lot of pain, uncomfortable. So at the same time, I started also drink more, and then back problem, drinking, and these lovely strong painkillers worked wonders. And then at one point, I asked myself, wow, this is not going so well. You know, I'm going actually downhill in my mind, in my state of mind, physically. And so at one point I started to make a decision to do something for myself. And at that moment, we were in India. So I was living in Holland and we decided to move to India. And I was in the north in Ladakh, beautiful mountain town in the Himalayas, very beautiful. And I heard of someone who was doing healing, and this is women, and they call them Lamo. I forgot that Ladakhi name. And so we went there, and it was full of local people, and we were only allowed to watch this, I think 5 foreigners or something like that. And at the end, the woman was standing there. She goes into kind of a trance and very powerful. And then she asked one of the foreigners to come forward, and it was me. And I point towards my back, and she did something. And when that happened, I felt it could have lasted 1 second or 10 hours. I could not make a distinction. It was in such a wide open state. I felt this tremendous heat from my toe to my crown. I started to cry. And the next day was really interesting, because the next day I started to investigate and wanted to read books on spirituality, what I never really had done. So yes, so I bought some books on yoga, meditation, Buddhism, Ayurveda, and one point a Reiki book. And I remember sitting on the edge of the bed doing hands-on healing, and I go like, wow, this looks quite nice. So yes, and that was actually the beginning of my journey.
And a lovely story to get into it, and also to the fact that it healed something. So I think that's sort of just, I don't know, keep you wanting more.
Yeah, absolutely,
And I remember you talking about your first Reiki 3 training you did over there, and the guy was a bit whacked out, and like, here you go, here's your Reiki. And so
we did. So then we did Reiki 1, 2, and 3 in Kathmandu when we lived there, and it was great. For me in reality, it was great. But the Reiki 3 class was a little bit like, oh yeah, I got to go actually, and here's a little book, photocopy of some stuff, and here's the attunement. Okay, thank you very much, bye. And that was about it. But then the next day, what was really amazing, we were standing in front of the Palgrim's bookshop in Kathmandu, and we're just standing there. I think I was maybe deciding what to do. And as this couple comes along and they say, excuse me, do you know any Reiki teachers here? And we've just done this very strange short Reiki 3 class. And we go, wow, this is a strange sign. And we said, okay, maybe we just did Reiki 3, but we don't know anything. So maybe just go and have a look inside a notice board. And then we kind of followed them and said, oh, maybe we should teach you Reiki 1 in a week's time. And at that time, then we created these manuals, we created a logo, we called it Reiki House at that time. And we did the class for free to this English couple. But it was fantastic. Yeah, really enjoyed that. And then we moved to Darjeeling, and we lived there for a year, and there we had a Reiki center for a year.
And it's really interesting how things work out, because when you have experience where someone's not present and doesn't really teach you that well, you could very well easily change around and went, this weird wacky thing, and it's not really worthwhile, and not pursued it. So it's lucky there was something came along to kind of encourage you to keep going.
Yeah, I mean, at that time I had a lot of time on my hand because we were kind of traveling, so I started lots of meditation practices, and I felt something within myself that I thought, oh, this is something tangible is happening. I start to feel a bit better physically and emotionally. So yeah, that was a really good experience for me. I mean, we can read lots of books, fantastic, don't get me wrong, but if I read a cookbook, doesn't necessarily make sure that I can make a meal and eat it. So to do that, I really have to practice that and implement it and work with it to eat something, and then I have a full belly, and then I go like, oh, that was great. So yeah, sometimes we read books and we don't really make the meal or let alone eat it. But yeah, at that time I had a lot of time to practice, and that really brought a lot of change.
Awesome, yeah, because then you actually, you work with it more, because often you learn it and you do it for a bit and then you shelve it.
Yeah.
And then some years you come back and then you realise, oh, hang on, there's something in here. Why did I shelve it for that long? Because you don't realise, because you haven't been working with it enough to know that there's something more here. And when you look at your journey in the Reiki space, you've made a successful business, you've become a teacher, a speaker, and also written books. It takes a lot to get there, because it's almost 25 years of a lot of hard work, a lot of effort, because people think you just snap fingers and it just happens overnight, or they get some brainwave idea, oh, I learnt Reiki this weekend, oh great, I'm going to open a business. Have you ever thought about what you're doing? And some of these people have a great story, but it took them a lot of effort to get there. And if I look at your sort of journey, maybe now you've got a work-life balance, hopefully, but when you start in the beginning, not necessarily. So can you speak a bit about your early days starting out as a practitioner? Because I'm sure you would have came along with challenges or faced struggles when you first started off.
Yeah, so we had first a Reiki center in Darjeeling for a year, and mainly volunteer work. So we used to go to the tea plantations and do hands-on healing on the local people who were sick or had something. And what was wonderful there is that everybody was just so, okay, whatever. You do whatever you need to do. And then when we went to Australia, to Sydney, people were going, but what do you do? How do you do it? They were so in their head instead of really just being open. And I found for me, there was a really big difference. Very interesting. Because for me, healing is actually getting out of our head and being wide open. So by doing this kind of practice for a year in Darjeeling with people who are really willing and wide open, that was a really good training ground. So as I said, it was more volunteer, but then when we came here in Sydney, where I'm now just visiting, it took a lot of time. I was rolling out rubbish bins for a while at a big, beautiful, modern apartment estate to get some extra income. And Brahman, my ex, she was pregnant, so we had a little baby as well on the way, and actually it was very quickly born. So there was a lot of I think a lot of dedication, a lot of focus, a lot of effort, a lot of training for yourself. And I think this is what people forget. As you say, we do a quick class maybe, and people go like, oh, now I'm going to be a Reiki practitioner. But to actually be successful in that is do solid training, but then one of the major points is really sit on your butt and do the practice, that people really feel that what you're talking about is real. And I think that makes a big difference. So for example, again, I I say, oh, I'm teaching you cooking, but if I only do 2 or 3 meals, and then it will be very limiting. But if I train myself to be a really good chef, then of course that will be something quite different. So really making sure that you walk your talk. That for me is a really important element. And then lots of time and effort, lots of pushing yourself to make it work. Not easy, because as you're self-employed, we talked about it before, your life goes like this, your income goes like this. It's not always certain. At the end of the week, you don't always get the paycheck. So it's a very different ballgame. And therefore also, I noticed too that some people say, okay, I'm going to do this, and they used to have a normal job, right? And they get like nicely a pay every week or every month, and suddenly they don't. And they actually, that create a lot of worry and a lot of tension. So then their way of teaching and hands-on healing start to be infused with a lot of worry and tension, because they actually base it on a paycheck. So for me, it's actually, why do you want to teach or why do you want to do treatment? Is it A, to make money, or is it because you wanted to have it as a lifestyle? And that is a really big difference too.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think this is really good for yourself to investigate what is the reason that I want to do it. And you know, if you look worldwide, to actually people who make a solid income for their family. So I'm not talking about the husband or the wife who has a great job and their partner is actually just doing Reiki on the side because they don't really need some extra income, or maybe just a little bit of extra income. But no, a person who solely makes their living from practicing the system of Reiki is rare, is really rare.
And I like, there's lots of parts in there, but I do like the fact that direct experience, because I think no matter what teaching or what industry, those have actually had direct experience and worked with it rather than a textbook. You learn so much from more.
Absolutely.
And that's the real examples where someone else can resonate with, because when things happen and people talk about stuff, go, yeah, I know what you mean, because of this, and then we can normalize it for somebody else.
Yeah.
So that's really cool. Now, if we take a time walk back to those early days, back to 1999, and yes, there wasn't as much knowledge that you knew back then, and you had the guy that was not really present and just, here you go, here's your manual, and off we go. If you think about what knowledge you knew back then, how back then would you describe what is Reiki?
Yeah, well, that's a good question. Actually, at that time, maybe I would have said it's more about hands-on healing. So that has changed. And what was happening in 1999, 2000, 2001, there was a very small group of people, some people from America, Canada, one from South America, and then a couple of people from Japan we got in contact with, and who are doing a lot of research, what was fantastic. And that's actually, we based the Reiki source book on that. And so, yeah, there was a lot of stuff happening at that time. Hiroshi Doi in 1999 came to Vancouver as the first Japanese Reiki teacher to publicly speak. I think there was about 80 plus people at this conference. And, you know, like people were like, wow, it's so different. And so in 2001, when I went for the first time to Japan and met up with two Japanese Reiki teachers, it was just such a wonderful experience and such a different kind of focus. And yeah, in the beginning, I think it was the way I was trained, the radio or initiation attunement was very elaborate, and it was all, you look at somewhere external, Reiki is somewhere over there, and you know, it's just about hands-on healing. But then when you actually go deeper, and the more I went to Japan, and since 2012 I trained with a Japanese priest, then you start to really realize, okay, hang on, there's a whole different layer within the system of Reiki, what we might have never really unpacked or looked at. And it's actually all there. It's not, you know, for me, it's, I see this a lot of people create their own styles, right? They have Cloud Reiki and Purple Reiki and all these kind of names, and some people often said, oh, why don't you create your own name? So we just kept the traditional name, I say, in Japan, because for me it's not I want to add things to it, right? It's not about, for me, oh, I like this and I add this to it. If we think about it, Mikasui had these enlightened experiences, then who am I to change it? You know, who am I to add more stuff to it and make it all more complicated and more symbols, or I don't know, different religious practices with it. But if we look at the structure of the system of Reiki and then we place it in Mikasui's time in Japan as well, not in modern time Japan, this is also what happens a lot, then we can start to see something quite different. So that's been quite an interesting journey from when I first started and thought it was something external. And only based on hands-on healing to something what I clearly can see is it now as a way of life, a way of living.
Yeah, and I like how you've mentioned both things, because that's something I'd wanted to know as well. It's like, how do you see it then to how do you see it now? And now you see it so much more. And yeah, so I find that sort of fascinating too, because obviously we go through journeys a lot, and there's probably lots you could pick out of those sort of bits and pieces, but there's an aspect that often you hear in Reiki that we are the great bright light, and people don't quite understand what is that meaning. You know, can you explain a bit more? What is this great bright light?
Yeah, I mean, in the system of Reiki, the name given to that is that great bright light. We can say it's our true nature, our essence, who we truly are. So without all, if we look at, for example, within the system of Reiki, we have the precepts. So without anger, without worry, without fear. And as we all know, we might say, oh, I don't have much fear or I don't have much anger. But then if we really prod, see what comes out, you know, and we might live a really calm, good life, and then suddenly COVID hits or someone is prodding you, then maybe or probably that anger and worry and fear will definitely come out. So it's still there, it's sitting there. Sometimes very subtle, sometimes very profound in our way of being. So for me, therefore, that great bright light is going back to who we truly are, and that we call it our true self or true nature or great bright light. And then we can ask ourselves, okay, what is this great bright light? This great bright light is having no anger, no worry, being grateful, being true to your way and your being, and being compassionate. And then people go like, yeah, but I'm compassionate, but that's a different compassion. You know, true compassion, is pointed out within the precepts, is a compassion what doesn't change according to circumstances. Right? Normally our compassion changes according to circumstances. Oh, I'm really kind to you. Oh, you're my best friend. I love you, blah, blah. And then you do something and then they go, well, not anymore. No, now you're a bastard. So then the compassion has changed due to circumstances. So that is not, it's unstable kindness or compassion. So there's, again, lots of different layers we can see within the precepts, for example, all by itself. And then, of course, when we can carry this great bright light with us in today, we also see within the precepts the word today. Today, traditionally in Japan, means in every action we do today. We can see a lot of these Zen masters, for example, using the same wording as we find within the precepts, or the word today, or even within the precepts we see Shinshin Kaizen means mind-body harmony. So what means that with our body we use today in all we do, making tea, going to work, interacting in my daily life, that can we carry these precepts? Can we carry this compassion with us in all we do? That for me is the essence of the system of Reiki. It's not just doing hands-on healing, but and that, as we all know, that is difficult. And what is quite funny really, so when I started to train with this Japanese priest in Japan, they're just so traditional still. And then you can say, oh yes, but I'm really kind, I'm really compassionate, I've got no anger and no worry. And I go, really? Let's push some buttons. Like we modern teachers, we don't do this anymore. No. We don't have the skills of doing this, but these traditional teachers, and then they really push your buttons and they say, well, you were just saying that you're really kind and compassionate, but did you just notice what you just did? And you go, oh shit. Right? So it's really the first time I went there in 2012 for a week and a half, man, it was confrontational. It was really hard, very different, but I like it because you're really being put into your place.
And you don't realise how much of a little small wheel it is, because you think, oh yeah, I've meditated, look, I've done this, and then when you hear what they've done, you go, oh, it's nothing.
Oh, it's a very different
Yeah.
ball game. Yeah.
And there's lots of things that was racing through my head as you were talking about that. But so what I was kind of like is, obviously, more and more you do this, I've noticed changes in your thought and patterns.
Yeah.
And even with anger, like you still think of it, it still annoys you when something happens, but it's not like it comes bubbling out of the body and you start, getting all red and flustered. You find it like the emotion has gone out of it a little bit, like the emotion.
Yeah, it softens, and this is the thing, the more we practice the system of Reiki, it's not about, I was saying if you really want to feel energy, that's quite easy. You just stick your finger in a PowerPoint. You don't really need to do it. Don't do this at home in a class. Or if you want to see energy, you grab a metal stick and you hit, your head and you see beautiful colors and lights and stars. But actually to be able to carry this love and compassion and kindness, what is unchangeable, into your daily life, man, that is hard. We all know that, and particularly during the COVID, we've seen this, how many people have become more worried, more fear, more anger, etc. And that for me is really also the base of hands-on healing, because we can ask ourselves, for example, if I do hands-on healing on someone and I still have lots of anger and worry and fear, I'm not being grateful, I'm not being true to my way, my being or compassionate, or I do it with a state where there is no anger, there is no worry, I'm truly being grateful, being true to my way, my being, and being compassionate, of course, that quality is very different. We only have to experiment that with a hug, for example. So, that for me is the precepts, these few sentences are really the core of the system of Reiki. And to be able to really bring that with you in your daily life, man, that's the rest of our life practice. It's not just like a 1 day, 2 day or a 3 day class that takes the rest of our life.
And just the aspects like compassion and that, it's so easy to be compassionate for someone who's nice or someone's been a victim or something, but then when you've got someone who's like clearly not just a criminal but done bad things, it's like, I don't know if I want to give that person compassion to one sense, but not necessarily the sense where you should be like giving the same to like you would to someone else who's been the victim. So that's where it gets tricky, because then you go, well, actually, there's probably times where I haven't been, compassionate to a certain extent, but then there's a little bits where you go, I don't think that person deserves that, or that person.
This is it, and then we get really confused, and this is why the precepts look very simple, but it can also trigger a lot of confusion if we haven't really thought about it properly. And then, therefore, that is not enough, right? If it's only in our mind is not enough. We have to really embody it. And this is why, we talk about the embodiment of that great bright light, or the embodiment of your true nature or your essence. And when we embody it, it becomes something very different. So then it becomes more like stable as a mountain. Doesn't mean in the beginning that we do not get angry or worried. Of course we do. But maybe the stretch of being angry or worry lessens. So instead of being angry for 6 months with someone, we say, oh, now it's only 3 months, and we practice more, and then, oh, now it's only 1 week, and then maybe it's 1 hour, and we realize, oh, actually, well, why am I really being angry about this? And ultimately, if you think about it, and most of the time we're angry with a person, that person might have already gone on in their life and moved on, and you're still carrying that anger. And if you think about it, if you carry anger for a whole day, do you feel tired or depleted? Of course. So imagine carrying anger for months, what that is going to do to your body, for years, or the same with worry. And, for example, I hear a lot of people, they might say, oh, yeah, but I don't worry during a treatment. Well, then investigate. Do you ask yourself, oh, I hope they feel something. Right? I hope my client feels something. Or I hope they get better. Or I hope they like it. Right? Or I hope I feel something. All of this hope is based on fear, right? On worry. That they don't like it, that they're not feeling anything, that they don't get better. So some things we don't really realize what we're doing. And then we say, oh, there's no worry. in my treatment, and then we go later, I hope you liked it. Well, that's already worry.
Yeah.
Right? So we have to, this is why we have to really truly investigate how we're saying things, what we're thinking about, how we view it, if we really infuse it with anger and worry and fear and not being grateful. You know, it's the same. Normally we say, oh, I'm only grateful for positive things, but also being grateful that your client doesn't like it. You know, and that can happen. It's the same that someone doesn't like the Thai meal you're cooking for them. You know, and you have to be grateful for that.
And there's an aspect when you're sort of hitting on about sensations and different things you're feeling and that. And one of them is one of my favourites is don't get distracted. It's practice.
Yeah.
And something you say quite often, and I'm sure like traditional Japanese teachers would be a lot more harsher. But someone like me, you know, yes, I can sit my butt down, I can do things, I'm a teacher's pet, so I'll follow the instructions, but I'm a thinker. I like to know stuff. I'm very much an analyzer. So I want to know stuff. And we can't help it, but because when you sort of, you know, we're human beings, when you're working with energy, you're going to feel different things.
Of course, yeah.
And the human person, plus the fact we're adult, so the mind's always sort of ticking. And, you know, that, can you talk a bit about don't get distracted and that just practice? Because we can't help it. We kind of feel things. We want to know stuff. We want to sync it. We want to analyze it. We want to know why. We want to go, hang on, but this practice does this and that one does that. Does that mean this is what you need to do? You know, because we're trying to sync things.
This is it, you know, we are so in our heads these days, and particularly because we watch a lot of television, we watch YouTube, we sit on the phone, we use WhatsApp, all of these, you know, Instagram, blah, blah, blah. The energy is so around here. And then we constantly, why? And so, okay, we have to ask ourselves, you know, the practice itself is actually a training for in our daily life. Well, in our daily life, we all know we're already so distracted by everything, right? We talk to people and and what did you say again? Like we're so distracted. So if I do my hands-on healing or my meditation practice and I'm actually promoting distraction within myself, like, oh, let me see what I feel, let me see what I sense, etc., then I'm amplifying the distraction in my daily life. And we all know that a daily life, what is very distracted, is not so healthy, is not so good. We you know, we don't get things done, we walk with our heads in the clouds, what is nice, but we're not really focused. So therefore, we don't have to train for that. We don't have to train for distraction because we are distracted all the time already. So therefore, if we really want to change our life for the better, and we all know that, look at just general Google burnout or depression, how big that is these days in the world, right? So therefore important that when we do our practice, that we actually do the opposite of our daily life. So non-distraction. And there's I love Sunrei Suzuki, a Zen master, and he wrote in his little book, he once like, a student came in, Sunrei Suzuki, Zen master, when I meditate, I see Buddha. And he answers back, don't worry, keep practicing, it will disappear by itself. You know, I like these traditional teachings, and my teacher too, you know, he keeps saying, don't get distracted, stay focused. So I see it a little bit like this. We all have stuff in ourselves, right? From our upbringing, from school, parents, you name it. And imagine a clear bottle of water. And when I look at this bottle of water, then there is mud at the bottom. Because that's the mud of my daily life, what I've accumulated, right? And then I start to be distracted. So I go this way, that way, this way. I go like this. All this sediment, all this rubbish comes up to the surface. And because it comes up to the surface, I cannot see clearly, right? This is what we have these days. We cannot see clearly. And because we cannot see clearly, I cannot be kind and loving. Because I cannot see clearly, I have a lot of anger and worry and fear. So we go this way, that way, here, there, and everywhere, because our mind is all over the place. But if I keep it still, if I stay focused and not being distracted, then that sediment starts to settle all by itself. And then I can start to see clearly what to do with my life, clearly how I can lead a healthy life, clearly how not to be angry, not to be worried, how I can be compassionate, what is not changed by circumstances. So therefore, when we train, when we do hands-on healing, we have to stay focused. Also, when we do the meditation practices. But yeah, often we get distracted by our senses, right? What we smell, what we see, what we hear, what we taste, what we feel during hands-on healing. And then we label it. But again, like the other day, we had a Thai meal. And, you know, one might say, oh man, this is so spicy. And the other person might say, I could use more spice. So what we perceive, what I perceive is very different than you. And then, you know, often we see this too. The teacher says, oh, but I perceive this and this means that. And so when you perceive it, you have to feel exactly the same thing. But that is not working. Then you're putting the energy in a box. And if we look at universal energy, it cannot be boxed in, right? If we box it in, we limit it. And then we get limited hands-on healing, limited meditation, limited practice. And when we have limited practice or hands-on healing, then again, very easy. We become angry, worried, fearful. We have compassion, but constantly change. Oh, I love you. No, I don't love you. I'm kind. No, I'm not kind. Oh, yeah, like this. And we go like this in our life. So yeah, therefore, when we train, make sure you stay focused. And we know this, right? You just picked me up from the place I'm staying and we drove through Sydney. Sydney is pretty busy. If you drive the car and not focused, you probably have an accident. Or if I cut vegetables and I'm not focused, I might cut my finger off. Or, you know, it's again the same, particularly when we interact with people. If we're not focused, that other person doesn't feel heard or seen, right? I have this friend in Holland, and when we have dinner together, she is so focused. She really, you know, when you talk, she's like this, completely focused. So when I talk to her, I feel heard, I feel seen, I feel good. And then she remembers these things too, what I said, because she feels focused. And so therefore, if you're working with clients and you're unfocused, then your client doesn't feel heard. Your client thinks, well, where is your energy? Like, if I do hands-on healing and I get distracted, I start to watch television or start to talk or think about tomorrow, then where is your energy? Right? Your energy is also in the television, in the gossip, or in tomorrow. It dissipates.
And people do feel you're more present with them.
Absolutely.
And when you're not distracted, because if you're distracted all the time. So when you're not distracted, people like notice that when you remember things. And I remember years ago, a person who was going to a psychologist nearly every week, and then started going to because they were kind of like the picking order is psychologists, then it's social workers, and it's counsellors. We're at the bottom of the barrel. But then they said, you know, why are you coming to me instead of that? And it's like, well, you remember what I said. The other person doesn't even remember what I said from one week to the next.
I mean, that's it. Yeah. It's the same, you know, I always say, give someone a hug and test it out at home. You know, if you're a Reiki practitioner or a teacher, have your group or with someone and you give the person a hug being distracted, think about something else and looking somewhere else, or you give them a hug where you're really looking at each other and really with your full attention. That is it's same, you know, within a system of Reiki. Often, I did this once, it's a bit naughty. So I was in this big class, and this one particular person said, Frans, you don't do gasho. Gasho means, like being very kind to the person. And I said, okay, let me do gasho for you. So I had the whole group sitting in a circle, and I think it was about 35 people. So I went to each person and did gasho like this. I asked them to keep their eyes open, gasho like that, to each person. And I said, okay, how did you perceive that? And they said, some people, that was really nice. I saw you, going like this. I said, yeah, but you didn't look at what I was thinking in my mind. My mind was saying, oh, you bastard, bitch, asshole, right? Yeah. So therefore we can do the action, but if we truly are sensitive, we can feel what is beyond the action. Is that a true action of love and compassion? Or is there something behind the action? Or is the action empty of compassion and kindness, and maybe full of insecurity or worry or fear or anger? And, if you look on the street or you talk to people, you can feel that. You can see it in the way they sit, the way they speak. So it's very important.
And people do feel energy. And more days I notice things and I'm probably more self-aware of stuff or see it differently. But I remember the early days in this journey, I'd go travelling and you'd be on an empty bus and the whole 40 seats are empty, but someone will sit beside you. And you'd be sitting there going, why? What's wrong with the other seats? And the whole time you'd be sitting there, and it wasn't until more your recent years, someone said, they're probably feeling your energy. Oh, didn't occur to me. It just goes, what's wrong with the other 40 seats? Can't they see I've got luggage? I've got to get out. Should I get out or is that going to be unpolite? And now I just don't know. I just kind of go, if someone sits beside me and the bus is empty or whatever.
It's great,
Maybe they just
good
had
opportunity.
a bad day and they needed the energy, or maybe it makes them feel better even if you're not having a conversation, or maybe I don't look scary.
That's it, yeah.
I'm safer to sit beside even though there's a whole empty bus. So you're realizing more, you're just watching the dynamics of the energy more, which is interesting. And another one of a favorite is also don't get attached to the outcome, or let go of the outcome as well. And that's something I notice, the more that you're not attached to what the outcome and just let it be and be open to whatever they need, or not being distracted, the more seems to happen. And that's something you talk about a lot, like not clinging to the past, not clinging to the present or future, not clinging to anger, worry or fear. So can you speak about that, not clinging?
Yeah, for me the whole thing is that we hold on so tight to specific outcomes, and then what happens when the outcome is not met, right? Then we get worried and fearful and angry, and we're not being grateful. So be wide open. And for me also, when I cling, I grasp, and then when I hold my hand like this with any idea of an outcome, then is the energy flowing and open and loving or kind? Not really. It's become a fist. It becomes very tight. Hold that fist for a day or 2 days or a week or a year. Man, that's going to be tiring. You get cramp. It's not so healthy for your body. Also not for your mind. So therefore, open the hand. Open hand of acceptance. Open hand of being grateful. Whatever comes in, comes out. And therefore also, if I hold my hand like this, and I have all these things I want to accomplish, and I have really a lot of expectations, now nothing can move. The energy cannot move because it's stuck. But if I open like this, now there is an openness. And we all know when we're more open, we feel better, we feel more joyful, we feel playful, we feel, therefore, we can be more compassionate, we feel more relaxed. So don't hold on to anything ultimately. In Japan also they have these wonderful phrases, burn everything, whatever happens, burn it. And when you burn it, then it's okay, all gone. Then you're free.
Yeah, and it's nice to be free, or even just I found the more you just was open to whatever that person may receive, forget about, trying to set intention to whatever they're specifically asked, then something else seems to transform, or they get it in a different way, which you wouldn't have expected.
Yeah.
And we don't know what their journey is, and we don't know is there another stepping stone before they get to what they actually came in and asked, or there's something else that they didn't even know that they needed? But it keeps bringing them back to whatever their true alignment of whatever it is.
I always say, if I'm really honest, I don't really always know what I need, right? Maybe I thought today I needed this little jumper, but maybe it's too hot. So I wasn't really, we don't always know. Or maybe I thought, oh, that chocolate was great, and I was like, maybe I should not have that chocolate. So if I'm honestly, and I don't know what I need, how the hell do I know what someone else needs? Impossible. So therefore, be wide open, no expectations. But this is also when we go for a meal. So for me, when we do this training within the system of Reiki, it's training for life. Because life, we have so many expectations. Right? I might go to a restaurant and have the expectation that it's going to be this. And when that expectation is not being met, then I'm disappointed, I'm angry, then maybe I'm angry towards the people I'm with, so I don't give them a nice experience. And then my evening is spoiled, right? And I go to bed unhappy because the meal wasn't good and we had an argument, or it's just the way it is, right? So if we can train, this is why the training itself within the system of Reiki, the hands-on healing, working with the symbols and mantras and the precepts and the meditations and Reiju initiation or attunement, is really about preparation for life.
And one of the aspects or elements is self, and initially to work first on yourself before working on others. Sometimes, I know when I first started, worked on everyone else, was happy to spend hours, days, whatever, but you kind of forgot about yourself until you hit a roadblock where you have a major health conditions or something takes you out and you go, oh, that's right, self. I remember there's someone saying something about that. Can you talk about the importance of first working on yourself?
Yeah, I always say, I have here a cup of tea. I always say, I cannot give you tea if I don't have tea, So if my energy is scattered and worried and fearful, how can I be helpful for other people? Is really, if I'm blind and I want to help another blind person, then it's the blind leading the blind. So first I have to see as much as possible. Doesn't mean we have to wait. We can help people, of course, but we have to become aware that it's just the beginning steps. We first really need to make sure that we take our own blinkers off, that we can start to see clearly. So what do we start to see clearly? What the right training is in the right way, So I have a new book coming out, The Way of Reiki, and it's in October, November. And it's really also focused on how to practice correctly. I mean, it's the same. For example, if I make a cake, if I don't see clearly how to make the cake, I might grab all the ingredients, chuck it in a pot, all at the same time, might not even unwrap them, and put them in the oven and hope a cake appears. Well, we all know that's not how to go to work. There's a very specific structure of making a cake. So, but I need to see that, right? I need to be smart about it. And nowadays we do these classes of hands-on healing very quickly. We think it's just about hands-on healing, and we haven't really read the right instructions. So, for example, instructions within the system of Reiki, very clearly, do not anger, do not worry, be grateful, be true to your way and your being, and be compassionate. Shinshin Kaizen, mind-body harmony. What means that if my body is doing hands-on healing and my mind is all over the place, then there is no mind-body harmony. My mind is somewhere else. So already I've misread the instructions. So if I already say, it doesn't matter when you do hands-on healing as a teacher, and whatever you think about, then we have not even understood the instructions. We haven't even read the instructions. It's like, let's make a cake, but we don't read the recipe. The cake will not give the desired results. We might not even be able to eat the cake. So therefore, really important that we know what the instructions are within the system of Reiki. Then we can get the right result. And again, my teacher in Japan, he just pushes. Oh no, I'm always very peaceful. If you go like this, okay, let's see. Let's see if that's the truth or not. And this is, you see a lot. When, for example, people start to do hands-on healing and suddenly they feel the need for protection, or I'm picking up negative energy, I'm being really worried. Well, one of the first precepts is do not worry, right? So how come then that we worry about this? Because we have not looked at ourselves first. We've just thought about, oh, hands-on healing, I'm going to teach it, I'm going to make money. So again, actually what we first said in this interview, what is your intention of teaching or doing treatment? Is that about to make money and you forget yourself? You're going to run into problems. Guaranteed, right? Because you forget yourself.
Yep. And the second part of the self is also about self-practice. And some people think, oh yeah, it's just a 2-day course and occasionally do some hands-on healing and occasionally do this. But it's actually, the more traditional ways is that you're continually practicing and you're practicing in the right way. And that gets a very different result, you know, when you do hands-on healing or just even throughout your life. So can you speak about the importance of self-practice?
Yeah, I mean, it's very clearly, again, I come back to the precepts, right? If it would be the case that after 1, 2, or 3 or 4 initiations, humans, Reiki, or a 1-day class, a 2-day class, and a 3-day class, if after that we would have no more anger, no more worry, we always would be grateful, we always would be true to our way of being, and we always would be compassionate, what doesn't change according to circumstances. If that was the case, fine. Then we don't need to practice anymore, right? But if we truly look at this, after 1, 2, 3, or 4 initiations at Humans Reiki, or a 1-day, 2-day, or 3-day, or a week class, we still do get pissed off. We still have a lot of anger. We still are not compassionate, what is unbiased. So that means we have to practice. And this is why, you know, within the system of Reiki, we have the precepts on how to practice, you know. So again, for example, and don't get me wrong, it's great. It's great, right? If you do hands-on healing on yourself in the night and then you fall asleep, and then people will say the next morning, oh, I did some great hands-on healing on myself. No, you were sleeping. Of course we feel something, but you were sleeping. Your mind might have even been dreaming about that a lion attacked you. You might actually, in your dream, was very fearful. So the energy was also very fearful. You was not focused, you was not aware, there was no clarity in your practice. Of course it's nice, don't get me wrong, but that will not give the results of leading a life without anger, worry, fear, being grateful, being true to your being, and being compassionate. Right? It will not give the desired result because we're not baking the cake in the right way. Right? So therefore, we have to really realize, how do we make this cake in the right way? How do we practice correctly so that we also get the correct result? The same thing, if I go to the gym, if I don't practice correctly, I might even injure my body, right? And if I don't practice hands-on healing on other people correctly, then I might even injure my own mind and energy. So it's really important that we know how to practice correctly. And the first point of call is, who is doing this? Me. So I have to look at me, not at you, but first me.
Yeah. And often in the Reiki world, there's a lot of buzzwords. and sometimes I think people just use it because it sounds good, or it's just what everyone else is using, or it's fashionable, but not necessarily truly understand the meaning of. And one of them is being Reiki. Everyone's going, I'm being Reiki. What does being Reiki actually really mean?
It's the same, you know, when for a while there was this wonderful buzzword. Oh, I'm feeling one with everything. And this is Buddhist teacher. I like this particular teacher, and he was a bit fed up with this buzzword. I'm feeling one with everything. He said, okay, there's a really easy way to test this at home. You grab a candle, you light the candle, you stick your hand in the flame, and you're going to be one with the flame, right? And of course, because when I'm one with fire, then the fire is not hurting me, right? So, okay, if you can do this, then you're really in that oneness space. If you don't, shut up and keep practicing. But it's the same. Being Reiki is being in this deep, interconnected space with all that is. So, again, the same test is very valid. You know, we might stand somewhere in a group or sit in a cafe or stand in a paddock and we all calling out, I'm being Reiki, I'm being Reiki. Well, as soon as we say, I am, there is already the I involved, right? The ego is already there. So that means as soon as we keep saying, I am being Reiki, you're actually emphasizing the I, you're emphasizing the ego. So you're already saying it's not true. Do you know what I'm saying? It's the same, I am really feeling this oneness. There's already an I involved. The ego is already involved. So already the way you're saying it, if you listen carefully. So these teachers, these traditional teachers in Japan, like these priests or priestesses in Japan, they listen to what you say and how you say it. And then they say, okay, did you just heard what you were saying? You're actually saying something contradictory to what you want to say. And you go, shit, you're right. It's just intellectual stuff. It's just some projection in my own mind. And this is why, again, you know, we really have to investigate. And again, the precepts are a wonderful measuring stick. Do we get angry? And of course, if we do get angry, how long is the anger lingering? For 1 month, 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, the rest of our life? How long is my worry lingering, right? Am I being grateful? How much is that? How is my way am I being? How is my compassionate? And then we can really start to see, okay.
And language is an interesting one. It's one that I've been working with the last year too, because through other practices, you know, critiquing, because you don't realize what you say sometimes, because you think you say something, but then when you realize, you go, oh, okay, am I sinking in the wrong kind of attitude? Like, I have to? No, I get to. You know, so you start to correct your words, and you don't even realize what you're saying. And sometimes the word that is the English word, so you don't know how else to go. Well, I am. Well, how else do I say that? That doesn't come with the I. There, you know.
And therefore, in the end, there is nothing to say. There's just the actions, what prove, you know, there's nothing to say. But your actions in your daily life, that is really what you're saying. Do you know what I'm trying to say?
Yes.
So that's you know, and what are these actions? Again, anger, worry, grateful, being true to your way, being compassionate. And it doesn't mean that we have to lay down, you know, and people just walk over you. No. Right? We have to stand up also for our right, but in a compassionate way.
Yeah, interesting.
Don't get confused about that either.
No. And another one you sort of hear is, you know, because you talk about the interwovenness and everything and everyone. And when you first start in this world, and especially some years ago, the understanding of everything and everyone, it's like, especially a beginner, and someone who's not been sitting and doing meditations or those kind of things, don't sort of get it. So how do you explain that to a beginner? Like, because it's a hard concept to kind of go, no, we're everything, whatever.
Yeah,
you know?
It's really, well, I mean, in a way, you know, we can already see that, you know, we are not an independent individual. You know, I need the water, so the water needs to come from the tap or from somewhere. So a plumber has to install it. So I'm dependent on the plumber to get the water, right? Or the tea bag needs to come from somewhere. So it's not that I can live as a solid individual somewhere. And then if that's true, well, try to hold your breath, right? You can't. So we also need the air. So therefore, we also dependent on the air. So we already see this interconnectedness, right? And when we start to see the interconnectedness of my well-being, then that affects your well-being, and your well-being affects my well-being. And we all notice, how we see this these days. And this is again why there needs to be compassion, but doesn't change with circumstances, because then we can really create a world what is compassionate. But as soon as it's constant that I involved, or dependent on circumstances, or we hold into that anger and worry and fear, and we don't see this deep interconnectedness that your action will have an effect on someone else, and that someone else's action will have an effect on you, right? If that plumber is saying, no, I'm not coming, then you cannot drink water, you die. If the air says, I'm not going to be here anymore, I'm going to wherever, somewhere, then of course you also die.
Yeah. And I think you kind of notice the more and more, like, whatever your energy is, the people around you, because I just even noticed, even if someone comes in really aggressive in a corporate world, and all of a sudden, because you're just talking softly, and all of a sudden they just sit down because they're ready to take you on, and it's like you're not buying into it. Like you tend to have a different energy, or people just operate differently around you because they can feel you're in a different space, or you're not got that aggression or wanting to retaliate.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, but you can see it already in a person's, again, Shinshin Kaizen within the precepts, mind-body harmony. If my mind is anger, right, or full of anger, or full of worry, or not being grateful, then we can see it in a person's body. I mean, there's a mind-body is really like this. Then we can also feel it in their energy. So we have that mind-body energy, what is not separate units either. Again, we can see that deep interwovenness from it. Yeah.
And when you, another aspect or approach that the traditional people kind of come from is having a beginner's mindset. And it's something that comes up in very many other sort of teachings that I sort of work in, and things that I've been learning in, because you're approaching it from, what can I learn from this? Rather than, okay, I know this already. Well, if you know it already, you'd be doing it. So
that's a good point, yeah.
So I might have to refresh over it, because maybe I'm not doing it even though I think I am. So beginner's mindset is something that resonates with me, and obviously they approach their practices that way too. Can you speak about, that approaching it with a beginner's mindset?
For me, beginner's mind, very much a Japanese Zen idea, is that, when you begin with something, you're full of energy, you're full of love for it, you're full of openness, you're full of readiness, you want to soak up everything, and then we become arrogant, right? I know how it needs to be. I know this, and we can see this in a lot of seasoned practitioners and teachers. When we become like this, because we forget that beginner's mind, and therefore, again, every time you do something, no matter what it is, we have to see it from beginner's mind, because then it stays fresh, right? If I drink this cup of tea and I go like, oh, but yesterday's tea tasted like this, then this tea will maybe not so good, because we compare it, right? If we constantly compare with yesterday, or the day before, or last year, or 2 years ago, then life is not so good. But if we do beginner's mind, that comparing starts to soften, and therefore everything stays new, everything stays fresh. Life stays fresh, your practice stays fresh. So therefore, again, don't hold on to anything. I need to feel this, or this feeling means that, or this, when I see this, means that. And we all know that. For example, if I experience a blackness in my meditation, one person might say, oh, that's really scary, I'm the black is that night sky, I'm a bit fearful, when I go to bed I need to put the light on. For the other person, they say, oh, this feels so peaceful. So it's already a different interpretation. So who is right? So therefore, beginner's mind. Always beginner's mind in anything. And this is again why we need to train when we do hands-on healing on ourselves and others, or these meditations, train with beginner's mind, because we don't do this in our daily life. So if I want my daily life to be open, wide open, filled with compassion, I have to train somewhere because our daily life is not like this. We all know it. You know, if we're really honest, we all know that. So therefore I have to train somewhere. So therefore the hands-on healing and all these practices within the system of Reiki, no matter also in yoga, Tai Chi, Qigong, beginner's life, beginner's mind. Then our life starts to be that way, slowly, slowly, slowly. And therefore then we feel happier in our daily life.
But even in that meditation having blackness, you could even see that as being emptiness.
Absolutely.
Which emptiness is good. And you start through other practices, being in the void and empty was a good thing. Because when you're in that, you're unlimited.
Yeah.
Because when you got stuck in your head, you're stuck with whatever the stuff is.
Yeah.
Whereas when you're empty, then you could be anything.
Yeah, it's wide open. When we're wide open, there's beginner's mind. No comparison. And then, of course, when we're wide open, what happens to your energy? What happens to your mind? Everything, nothing sticks because it's wide open. Yeah.
Or less things, or you focusing more on the things you want rather than the things you don't want. Or noticing the good things,
but then even that, you know, that starts to soften, because if I have something what I want, then the opposite is something I don't want. So we even have to let go of the things I want, right? Because then both are softening.
And another one that comes up is state of mind and the importance of state of mind. So, and being in that crystal clear clarity and emptiness. So what does the role of state of mind play in the system of Reiki?
I mean, if you really look at it, I mean, simply we look at the precepts. Do not anger, do not worry, be grateful, be true to your way and your being, and being compassionate is all about a state of mind. The precepts don't talk about hands-on healing, don't talk about feel energy, don't talk about see a unicorn galloping through the sky with purple around it. No, none of that. Right? So again, we have to go to the basis, because so we put these precepts in a system as the instructions, as a really clear point. And then when we look at the mantras, for example, within the precept, for example, there is in Reiki 2 one mantra, if you translate it, my original nature is right mind. So already again, pointing towards the mind. All of them do that, but this is a very clear one. Right mind, what is that right mind? There's no anger, no worry, no clinging, being wide open, no comparison, don't hold on to anything. That is right mind. So again, Mikasuo took these teachings from existing spiritual Japanese practices. So we can still investigate, for example, clearly to see in Japanese Zen or Buddhist practices, and again, we don't have to be Zen or Buddhist because that's putting another little box in our thing. Just be wide open, but we can see that they all used, again, the same ideas about right mind.
And that's an interesting one where you could be borrowing that for like days, talking about stuff like that. Solid foundations is another one that resonates with me a lot, because having been in the corporate world, I'm used to building stuff and creating and always coming from solid foundations. And if it is, you never have to restart something again. You just can add to it because it's solid from the beginning. And that is an aspect that comes into the Reiki space, you know, being grounded, being centered, being focused. And Mikao Usui would actually, you know, start with that hara belly space and like, you've got to be grounded, centered first before we go anywhere else. Otherwise, you're like a leaf in the wind. Can you explain the importance of, you know, coming from that grounded, centered space? Yeah,
I mean, particularly, you know, like these practitioners already in Japan, like Mikasuo, we went to the mountains. Like a mountain is not wide here and narrow there, right? The mountain is already like wide at the base and then a peak. So if we wide open here and no solid foundation, we become very unstable. So what happens when we become very unstable? We get quickly angry, quickly worried, quickly fearful. When we're too much in the head and not really centered in our body. This is also when we start to look at when we see Reiki or spirituality as something outside of ourselves. It's not the embodiment. So therefore it becomes unstable. Or same thing, we can see a tree. When a tree has a beautiful canopy, rises up, fantastic. But if the tree doesn't have a good root system, the tree still be standing there, right? If there's no wind, no storm, and we say, oh, my practice is going really good. Look how grounded I am. I have this wide canopy. Because life is okay. And then COVID hit, or divorce, or we fired from our job, or other things. Boom, and we fall over because the root system has not been developed. But if we have a really good root system, then this big wind comes suddenly and we can stay stable like a mountain. So for example, the Reiki 3 symbol and mantra within the system of Reiki is really interlinked with a Japanese phrase called Fudoshin. It's a mind of being stable, being immovable. We like a mountain. Things come, things go. We can deal with it. We don't get angry about it or worried about it or fearful about it. And if we do, it dissolves really quickly. And we don't hold on to it for years to come.
And I think that was a dangerous thing. I look back now and go, I held on to too many things, but too many.
We all do.
Because you think, because it's not my doing and not my fault. Someone's done something, but still.
You're the one holding it.
I'm still one suffering. They've been and gone.
That's it.
So some of these teachings, you go, wish I had that was known some of them earlier, because I think I should have left. And even Sunray Suzuki's, I like your talkings about open the front door and the back door and don't offer a tea between. It's well, I didn't give it tea, I gave it cake.
You nailed it on the floor, right?
Come stand the next 10 years because I want you. Well, I didn't really want you, but somehow I just held on to it. And sometimes there's that happen to be right, that kind of, the sort of justice. So sometimes you've got to go, it's not worth it. Just let it go.
It's not worth it. Yeah. So that Sunray Suzuki quote is, for me, I love it. You leave the front door open, the back door open. Thoughts come in through the front door and go out of the back door. In the middle, don't serve them tea. And that's what we do. And, as you're saying, you gave them cake or a whole smorgasbord, or you nail them down. And then we stay angry and worried for the rest of our life. And what joy will that give you? Nothing, right? Something might be just one little thing, and we say, oh yeah, but it's just one little thing. But keep holding this for an hour, for weeks, or for months. You're going to run into problems. So therefore, better to let it go. It comes, let it go.
And it gets exhausting too. You get to the point that you're so exhausted. And even if you're, somewhat going to bed at a certain time and getting up, you're up, and a few hours later you're still exhausted.
Well, this is it. This is why we have a lot of difficulty with sleep patterns these days. We have depression, burnout. Look of all of these issues. Because we keep holding on to so much shit, right? We don't train ourselves. And therefore, if we train ourselves in hands-on healing, already with comparing, already with labeling, already with judging, already saying this is good, this is bad, already with worry, anger, and fear, then we're training for daily life for that, right? So therefore, our training should be in the right way. That actually the training will help us to make our life better, not to add more shit to it. But this is what we do a lot these days. This means this and that means this, and we analyzing and we put it into boxes, and then if it doesn't happen, we are worried, and then we get angry because the treatment didn't go that well, or my practice didn't go that well, and then we're just adding to what we have already instead of actually softening what we have already. So therefore, it's really important that we follow the instructions of the system of Reiki in a correct way, that we get the correct result. Just like if I want to make an apple pie, I need to make sure that I follow the right instructions, else I might get a whole different cake, or maybe the cake is not even eatable, right? And then we start to complain. And this is then what we see a lot as well. Then people start to, oh yeah, but this system doesn't work. I'm going to do this. And then 6 months later or a year later, that doesn't work. Why? Because we're not following the instructions correctly.
And there's so much there that you're sort of going, you kind of look back going, I wish I kind of knew some of this earlier when you first started off in your 20s, and maybe journey would have been different. Maybe I had to learn the hard way, could show others. But yeah, some of this sort of stuff, I think, in the way of living, probably, we should be training our young people in
absolutely.
that. Or wish that had occurred in our younger days, then you kind of might have had a different journey rather than this harsher road.
Yeah, I think for me that is definitely the case, like if we can, but again, we have to, as adults, we can train our kids in this, but as adults, we have to be an example, so again, first it comes from us, if I'm still being a bastard and cannot show compassion and kindness and be loving, etc., then I can train my kids it, but if I don't show this at home, again, there's a contradiction here.
And that's an interesting aspect, because you see a lot of that come in practice, or any field, doesn't have to be Reiki, any kind of therapist. They say one thing and they're telling people do this, but then they don't walk the talk.
Well, I mean, this is it. Yeah. And that is difficult, I still do get, I was worried the other day that I could not make it to Sydney, for example, but I try not to hold on to the worry as much, don't hold on to it, or angry with the flight or the airport companies. You don't help yourself with it, but this is it. It's not that suddenly your anger and worry is gone like this, like a snap of the fingers, but that it softens, that you feel within yourself, I'm holding on less and less and less, instead of 6 months, 2 weeks, instead of 2 weeks, 1 day, that we can soften that. And then we can just be kind to each other. Just be kind. It's not that difficult.
And so if you had one advice that you could give, someone beginning to Reiki or starting or considering doing Reiki, what's one helpful advice that you could give them?
Find a good teacher is the first one.
Okay.
A teacher who actually knows the recipe. And who can instruct you not in confusion and anger and worry and fear, but in the opposite, so that your life becomes better, right? This is really important. I mean, there's wonderful teachers out there, but there's also teachers out there, like anything, a bit questionable, and I need to be really honest with that too. It's the same when I go to a doctor, there's fantastic doctors, but there's also doctors who are a bit questionable. We all know this also about religious institutions. There's some wonderful ones, and there's also a lot of abuse in these religious institutions. So it's the same. So be careful, check the person out, see if they walk their talk, see if it makes sense, and that whatever they teach in the training is actually softening your anger and worry, not adding to it. Again, I just talked to someone the other day and I said, my teacher told me that my heart chakra is blocked and now I'm worried. So the teacher is installing worry in the person. That is not such a good thing, right? We already worry enough in our daily life. So therefore, what are you installing? What are you installing in yourself? And what is the teacher installing in you? So in other words, if you want to plant no anger, no worry, being grateful, being true to your way and your being, and being compassionate, then you have to plant that seed today, right? In all of these teachings, there's a wonderful, if I want to see what my past was like, you don't have to go to the past. Just observe how you are today. Are you today angry and worried and fearful? Because that's what you have planted in the past. Or are you compassionate? you want your life in the future to be better, we don't have to send energy to the future. We have to really live today. What are we planting today? Because that seed of today will be the fruit of tomorrow, right? So am I planting kindness and love today, or am I planting anger and worry and fear today? And if I'm planting that, then don't be surprised that you don't get compassion and kindness next week or in 2 years' time, because that's what you've been planting. So what are you planting with your practice? Right? Are you planting confusion? Are you adding to being distracted? Or are you planting focus, sincerity, less anger, less worry? That is really the...
And I love that. Wasn't sure what you were going to come out with, but they go, "Oh, teacher, great," and that sort of resonates with me, because it's not just any kind of teacher too. Some people, you could have 20 people lined up, all taught the same things, but it's also to where they are. If they're still messy, or they're not, like you said, walking the talk. But it doesn't matter. Like, if you are walking the talk, doesn't mean you're squeaky clean.
Absolutely.
But you are progressing and trying to do it, because we're never going to be squeaky clean. We've all got stuff going on, and even if you get to a point where you are in that Zen space, something comes along to test you.
I mean, this is one of the reasons, I went to first time in Japan in 2001, trained with lots of Japanese teachers, but I kept looking because I wanted to find this one person who really was embodying what I was looking for, that compassion, no anger, no worry, no fearful, being really wide open, who was actually really walking their talk and teaching in the right way, so that we have the right seed planted. And so for me, like, for example, I know my teacher, he does, I think, he chants about 3 hours in the morning and 3 hours in the evening, these practices. It's 6 hours a day, every day. And that is just the main practice, what he does. So, when he chants, it's like a knife. He just cuts through all the bullshit. And this is it, there's so much bullshit out there. So, just check for yourself, what resonates with you, and what helps you again to slowly walk that path of a compassion, what doesn't change according to circumstances. Then we can say we're walking a spiritual path. Right? Because ultimately, if we boil down spirituality, we come to kindness and compassion. So is that being emphasized? Is that being taught? Do the practices resonate with that? Do the practices align with that or not?
Yeah, love it. Do you have anything else or any parting words of wisdom you'd like to share?
Sit on your butt as much as possible.
Just practice.
But again, not just on your butt, Some people say, "Oh, Frans, but you don't sit lots on your butt." Again, don't compare my practice with your practice. We're all in different stages of our practice. So integrate it again into your daily life. So sit on your butt and integrate it at the same time in your daily life. How do we do this? Doesn't mean that we have to walk around like this, emanating light from our hands. Just be kind. Just be kind. It doesn't cost that much, right? That's it. It's actually just really simple, but we make it complicated. Just be kind. Already by being kind to people in your society, whatever you come across with, to the flowers, kind to the book, kind to your cup of tea, kind to anything ultimately, then that is the seed you're planting. Then life becomes more kind, then the world becomes more kind. That's it.
And I like kindness. It's a great one to end on. And sitting down on your butt, you go, "Oh, hang on." To do that kind of mileage, it's like, that's getting bigger. As a way, like I'm trying to do the, can I burn calories while doing this? Maybe if I chant hard enough, I can.
You might.
Be doing the gym at the same time or something. So thanks very much for joining me today and actually chatting. It's been wonderful. There's been so many things I could easily just talk about for hours on. I find your work very inspirational, and I feel blessed and grateful to have this opportunity and to actually be on the Reiki journey with you. And I can really see the dedication and work that's gone into it, because any kind of field that I've done, it's a lot of effort to get to where you are, to have that kind of knowledge and that kind of direct experience. So I truly, I'm grateful for that.
Thank you.
And it shines through in your teachings. And I think that's when you came back to that first one about teachings. It's like, there's a difference between, because I've done lots of courses, because I had to, because I've got multiple modalities and an accountant as well. So I've sunk a lot of dollars into studies. There's a difference in teachers, not just the knowledge they have, but the direct experience, and then what comes out of that in some other ways, or what happens later. There's always later reflections and things come out of it.
Absolutely, yeah. Thank you so much, and good to be here in Sydney. And
great to have you. And if you enjoyed this, then hit the like and subscribe button and add a comment. What did you get out of today? Is there one takeaway that you sort of resonated with? Love to hear about it. Peace to you all, and keep shining your light, and bye for now.
Bye.
Okay.
That went fantastic.